You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Imagine a prison so remote, so isolated, that even the locals call it the end of the world. Welcome, listeners, to FKI-3, or as it's more infamously known, Polar Wolf. Set more than 200 miles north of Moscow, deep in the Arctic Circle near the tiny village of Karp, this is Russia's most notorious prison camp. Now, why build a prison here? It's simple. Isolation is the ultimate barrier. The geographic barrier acts like a natural force field, called a buffer zone, making escape or outside contact nearly impossible. You might be thinking, how bad can a remote location really be? Well, picture this. Temperatures regularly plunge below minus 40 degrees Celsius, and just getting supplies in or messages out can take weeks. Let me set the scene. This isn't a prison with a view of snowy forests. It's a fortress surrounded by permafrost, where the harsh climate works hand in hand with the guards. So, when Russia wants to make someone disappear, whether a murderer, a spy, or a political dissident, Polar Wolf is the final stop, a place designed to erase you from the map and memory. Who actually ends up inside Polar Wolf? This isn't your average penitentiary. This camp houses Russia's so-called worst: murderers, thieves, spies, traitors, and now political prisoners like Alexei Navalny. You might ask, why mix political dissidents with violent criminals? Here's the dark logic. By placing government critics with society's most feared offenders, the authorities ensure maximum punishment and minimum hope. In carceral terms, Polar Wolf is a supermaxa facility designed for total control and minimal rights. But unlike Western supermax prisons, here isolation and psychological warfare are skills, not just policies. Now, imagine being a non-violent activist, convicted on trumped-up charges, waking up every day surrounded by men with nothing to lose. It's not just punishment, it's a warning to anyone else who might speak out against the system. This is punishment by example, written in the language of fear. Let's talk about Alexei Navalny, Putin's most formidable political opponent. Since the mid-2000s, Navalny's been a thorn in the Kremlin's side, accusing the Russian government of corruption and election fraud. He's survived attacks, like in 2017, when someone doused his face with a bright green chemical, leaving him partially blind. But Navalny kept going, organizing protests and calling out oligarchs. You're probably wondering, how did he end up in the Arctic? After surviving a brazen nerve agent poisoning in 2020 Novichok, a military-grade toxin, Navalny returned to Russia, only to be arrested and sentenced to over 20 years on charges widely seen as politically motivated. Now, you might ask, why would anyone go back knowing the risks? Navalny's answer: to show Russians that fear shouldn't rule their lives. But the state had other plans, starting with his secret transfer to Polar Wolf. His journey from activist to Arctic prisoner isn't just punishment. It's a message broadcast to every would-be dissenter. Challenge the regime and you could vanish into the ice. Let me walk you through the chilling story of Navalny's disappearance. On December 5, 2023, he vanished from his Moscow area jail. For 20 days, nobody, his lawyers, his family, the public knew if he was dead or alive. In prison slang, this is called a ghost transfer, moving a prisoner so secretly that even paperwork can't trace them. For weeks, Navalny was in transit, shuffled through Russia's vast prison system, each stop another layer of confusion. Now, you might be thinking, why so much secrecy? The answer is twofold. First, to break the prisoner's spirit with disorientation, and second, to cut off all outside support. In logistics, this is called compartmentalization, keeping all information on a need-to-know basis. Finally, on December 26th, his lawyers located him at Polar Wolf. Navalny sent a message: "Don't worry about me, I'm fine." But the subtext was clear. He'd survived the journey, but at what cost? This kind of transfer isn't just about moving body, it's about moving minds, reshaping hope into resignation. And for Navalny, the hardest chapter was just beginning. You might have heard the term gulag, but what does it really mean? Gulags were the Soviet Union's network of forced labor camps, built for punishment and, crucially, for free labor. Dictators love two things: total control and cheap labor. In Stalin's Russia, gulags were the mechanism for both. They used Penal labor prisoners forced to build railways, mines, and roads under brutal conditions. But after the Cold War, something curious happened. Instead of dismantling these camps, the Russian government simply rebranded them as prison colonies. Same buildings, new name, slightly better PR. Now, you might ask, aren't things better today? In some ways, yes, but forced labor and endless sentences remain the backbone. It's a system designed to break people using the old tools just with new paperwork. So, when you hear about Polar Wolf, remember, you're seeing the direct descendant of Stalin's gulags, with all the old machinery of suffering still quietly running. What do we actually know about daily life inside Polar Wolf? Shockingly little. There are barely any photos and almost no first-hand accounts. Secrecy here isn't just policy, it's a fortress of silence. Some facts have leaked out. The camp has a library, a shop, and a church. But don't let that fool you. These so-called amenities are like window dressing on a haunted house. Let me tell you a story. One ex-inmate described the journey to Polar Wolf as entering a place with no rights and no one to complain to. Beatings, electric shocks, and psychological torment are part of the ritual. In prison management, they call this total institution, where every aspect of life is controlled, from sleep to speech. And with Polar Wolf's isolation, oversight is almost impossible. So, if you're ever wondering why so little information escapes, remember, secrecy is the first line of defense for those who run places like Polar Wolf. Let's get real. What happens to prisoners at Polar Wolf? Survivors report a mix of physical and psychological torture beatings, cold exposure, and being locked in stress positions for hours. Ever heard of collective punishment? If one inmate steps out of line, everyone suffers. It's a tactic used to enforce obedience through peer pressure and fear. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this illegal? Technically, yes. But in a place this remote, rules are more suggestion than law. Guards often force prisoners to sign documents like the infamous Article 106 under duress, legalizing forced labor. And it gets worse in winter. Prisoners are made to stand outside in thin clothes at minus 45 degrees Celsius. If anyone moves, the whole group is drenched in freezing water. Talk about weaponizing the weather. The result? A system that breaks not just bodies but minds. Some prisoners would rather die than stay. That's the level of despair engineered here. One of the most chilling aspects of Polar Wolf is the communication blackout. Until recently, prisoners could get letters or make calls low and unreliable, but still a lifeline. But when Navalny arrived, the prison cell service was mysteriously shut down. Coincidence or calculated move? In security terms, this is information containment limiting flow to and from the outside. Now, you might ask, why cut off all contact? Because silence is power. If no one knows what's happening, no one can intervene. It's a tactic used by authoritarian regimes everywhere, from North Korea to, well, right here. For a political prisoner, this means true isolation, no news, no advocacy, no hope. It's not just about punishment. It's about erasing someone from public consciousness. So, as long as the blackout holds, Navalny's fate, the fate of countless others, remains a closely guarded state secret. If everything's so locked down, how do we know anything at all about these prisons? Enter the whistleblower's brave souls like Sergei Savelyev, who smuggled video files out of a Russian prison hospital. These leaked videos, captured by body cams, show torture and abuse in horrifying detail. And keep in mind, this was at a regular jail, not a prison camp like Polar Wolf, which is even less accessible. Now, imagine what goes on at a place designed to be invisible. If this brutality happens in the open, what happens in the Arctic shadows? In the world of information security, this is called air gapping, physically isolating a system to prevent leaks. But as Savelyev proved, even the tightest controls can fail when someone risks everything to tell the truth. Thanks to whistleblowers, we know just enough to be terrified than to understand why secrecy is the regime's best weapon. Why go to all this trouble? Why build a prison at the end of the world, shroud it in secrecy, and fill it with suffering? Because Polar Wolf isn't just a prison, it's a tool for sending a message. In political science, this is called deterrence by example. The authorities don't just want to punish Navalny, they want to warn every Russian, challenge us, and you'll end up here too. Now, you might be thinking, does this kind of psychological warfare work? Unfortunately, yes. When people see dissidents disappear into the Arctic and never return, self-censorship becomes second nature. Let me put it plainly. Polar Wolf isn't just about breaking individuals. It's about breaking the collective spirit of dissent. And as long as the machinery of secrecy and fear keeps turning, the message stays silent or vanish echoes across the nation. Before we wrap up, let's pull back and look at the bigger picture. Is this level of secrecy and cruelty unique to Russia? Sadly, no. From American black sites to Chinese re-education camps, state secrecy is a global phenomenon. Take the United States, for example. While U.S. prisons aren't Arctic hellholes, whistleblowers have exposed abuses sometimes covered up by layers of bureaucracy and classification. You're probably wondering, why do governments, even in democracies, hide their darkest secrets? The answer is simple: plausible deniability. If no one knows, no one can be held accountable. From information suppression to psychological operations, these are the tools of the modern state. The technical term is statecraft, but sometimes it looks a lot like old-fashioned intimidation. So, whether it's Polar Wolf or a classified CIA program, remember, sunlight really is the best disinfectant. Only by exposing the truth can change begin.